Welcome to Slacker Sports Show.
Good evening, sports fans, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Slacker Sports Show, where we discuss anything and everything you want to know about sports. Let's welcome in the co-host to the show, Mark. How are you, Mark?
Doing well. College football's starting to get up and going here before too long. I think they've had like one or two games here so far, televised nationally. NBA playoffs are moving to the next round, so plenty going on in the world of sports.
Yes, there is. And let's just start off with the NCAA. And if you didn't know, football right around the corner. We got the NFL in like under 10 days now, I believe. It's like it's about 8 or 9 days now before the NFL takes off. And the NCAA has already played a few games, as Mark said, and there's going to be more games coming soon. But right now, it's just mostly the smaller conferences playing, which I think is good because the smaller conferences are kind of the conferences that need that money for television, stuff like that. So to get that television money is better for the smaller conferences than I guess the Power 5 conferences, even though they need it. Well, I wouldn't say they need it. Even though they like the television money, it's a lot better for the smaller conferences to at least get some of that to help kind of build their conference. Because, yeah, if you don't have money, then the conference goes bye-bye. With what the world's going through right now, we don't really know a lot. What do you know about it, Mark?
Well, it just kind of seems like it's regionalized, or you can see separations in how different college football conferences are handling things. If you kind of break it down by where people live, like how many people are around that area, and then kind of just different points of view. As far as like the Power 5 conferences, I'll go over real quick kind of what they're doing, how they're approaching this season. The Big Ten, if you haven't heard, is they postponed their season, and it's still postponed as of this point. I know that they've talked to different people and come up with different ideas, and I heard the other day off a SportsCenter clip that the Big Ten was talking about starting up in November. And I guess I was kind of questioning if that made sense. I went back and forth on it, and then I heard Scott Van Pelt on his SportsCenter kind of saying doesn't make a whole lot of sense if the rest of the sport, if a lot of the teams are going to be basically done with their season or getting close to wrapping up their regular season. You're just now starting. It's not fair to your players because they're not playing for the same championships. They're not really in line with other conferences. And what do you think about the Big Ten or I guess any conference if they made this decision starting in November instead of now or postponing it even into the spring? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think if there was more than just one conference doing it, then it would make more sense. Football is a game outside, and even though football does sometimes touch that wintery aspect, the winter's not really the best time you want to play football. So to kind of postpone, even make it longer, and if the Big Ten does it, they're going to be the only teams playing, so they're only going to be playing each other. So I don't know. It's just I don't know. I could see both sides of it. I mean, we got football almost year-round before anyways with, like, the XFL, the Canadian Football League, all that stuff. There's pretty much football all year round now. So it wouldn't be too weird. The only thing I worry about is the championship aspect. And, like, the Big Ten has a few teams that could win the championship, like Ohio State, Michigan's, teams like that could actually win the championship. Most notably Ohio State, and how that's kind of unfair to their players because, we talked in a previous podcast about, is it fair to the players? Should they be able to transfer to a conference that allows them to play and stuff like that? And I don't know. It's just, again, we're playing this by ear and trying to figure out as we go. So I don't see the Big Ten actually doing that, mostly just because I don't know if television will pick it up as much since it's kind of now falling into the NBA season and basketball season. You think you got the NCAA basketball starting in usually November-ish, a little bit ahead of that. But like now you got, NCAA starting, the basketball starting. So I don't know if they'll be able to make it last and have that money kind of continue on till November. But looking at what other conferences are doing, like the Big 12, I know they're playing their 9 conference opponents, and then they're playing 1 non-conference game. The SEC is playing 10 conference games, and that's it. The ACC is playing 10-1. So, again, it's weird because now you got Big 12 playing 10 games total, and you got the ACC playing 11. So, I don't know. I don't know if they plan on even honoring an NCAA championship. I don't know if they're going to keep track. I mean, I know they're going to keep track of like wins and losses and whatever, but like think about it this way. If Ohio State comes into the season at number 2 and they don't play for 2 months, how could they be number 2? Kind of, vice versa. Like if you're a Big 12 team and you play all these games and, you're jumping all these Big 10 teams, do you have to wait 2 months for them to finish their season before you could play the championship? I don't know. It's just there's way too many questions. I don't know a good, easy way of doing it. So I think the only way to do it now is basically to kind of just play the season, maybe have conference championships, and that gonna kind of be it. And then I don't know how they could do bowl games, because bowl games, the biggest thing of that is, they're on TV, but you get all the revenue from bringing, fans and stuff to the stadium. So I don't know how they could even do bowl games, especially in a place where we are now, where it's kind of difficult to raise money, that type of money for like a bowl game that's usually sponsored by, a company. So it's going to be weird. I'm kind of interested to see what they end up doing. I know that you work with the KCAC. What are they doing?
Basically, our season, we're playing our first, it depends on the team, but they get to play their first 7 or 8 games, and then we're going to reevaluate in, I think it's October, kind of where we're at. Right now, we have the last 3 weeks that would have been regularly scheduled. We have kind of set aside as makeup dates, and if people don't need those, we'll go on to the schedule as planned. But right now, we kind of have a built-in kind of makeup period if needed. So we are going forward with our plan to play and everything, but leaving ourselves some flexibility if that needs to happen. And then the NAIA, which is the big kind of national body above the KCAC, it'd be like the NCAA for kind of smaller conferences, or smaller college conferences. They have postponed all of their championships to the spring, so at least there's kind of some clarity there that the football championship's going to be in the spring. So even if a conference moved it to the winter, say they move it to starting in November, starting December, at least there's that set championship schedule. And I think that's part of the problem with the NCAA football championship is I don't think I've heard anything as far as them moving it. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for the Big Ten to postpone a season if you know that the NCAA is not going to move the football championship. You're basically just playing games to play at this point, because championships, bowl games, all that stuff will have passed. And I guess for draft position, that's one thing I've heard is they want kids to be able to get tape from this year instead of looking back. Will it be 2 years for like next year's draft? It's just kind of depends on the conference, and I mean I know it's that way for NAIA conferences too. Just comparing the KCAC to some other conferences, each one handles it differently. So I get why each conference has kind of done things differently. It just depends on your situation, but it makes it difficult to kind of do things nationally or anything like that. So just kind of depends on leadership for your conference and for your national association and how they handle that. So in my opinion, I think the NAIA right now maybe has a clearer picture than the NCAA does, but probably not something you'll hear a lot about.
So the next thing we wanted to talk about is the NBA playoffs in full swing. We've already had a few, I don't know if you call them upsets, but there's a few teams that made it in that were not the higher seed, and one of the teams took it all the way to the end and ended up winning by 2, and that would be the Nuggets. Kind of surprised they made it in. I didn't think they were going to after kind of were they down like 3-1 in the series?
Yeah, I think I saw it was the first time since Cavaliers with LeBron James came back 3-1. It's been the first team to do it since then. So I thought the Nuggets would handle the Jazz easily, so I was as surprised by anybody about that series. But I'm happy they're moving on because I think they're a talented team, but they had to give it their all in that first round.
Yeah, and another two teams that are giving their all, and they're still in Game 7. That's going to take place tonight as we are recording this. So whatever the outcome is, we don't know. We can't read into the future, but that's between the OKC Thunder and the Houston Rockets, tied at 3-3. Westbrook is back. What do you think Westbrook can do for the Rockets?
I mean, you always like to get a superstar like Russell Westbrook back just based on pure talent, but I've heard the arguments that it may not be the best thing for him to come back now. He does tend to try to do everything if he can, and that kind of showed in Game 6, which the Rockets lost. He had 7 turnovers just by himself in that game. I think he shot it okay, but he turned the ball over a lot, and they ended up losing that Game 6. And one thing that has kind of caught my eye, and as I kind of dig into results and analysis of Houston more, is that they kind of ebb and flow back and forth as far as their not their style of play, but how things turn out. If they're hitting shots and doing things well, and everybody knows they shoot a ton of threes, and then have basically dedicated their offense to making layups or shooting threes. There's not any kind of mid-range shots anymore. If you're relying that much on the three, you're going to see your results kind of ebb and flow. If everybody's on, everybody's hitting shots, then things will go great and the Rockets could make a huge run. But if people aren't shooting the ball well, that basically takes away your whole offense. That could really hurt them. And I think that's part of the reason why they're tied and going into a Game 7 in a series that they probably should have won already, is just that they rely so much on one style of play and one part of the game that if that's not going well and they turn the ball over too, then they're kind of in a bad spot. What do you think about this series?
Yeah, like kind of what you explained is how I feel like a lot of college basketball teams are now. Kind of one team that comes to mind is like a Duke. Duke, if they hit threes, they'll beat everyone. If they can't make threes, then they will lose to the worst opponents. So I feel like, everybody in the NBA, most teams in the NBA can shoot. So for Houston to be able just to only try basically one style of play, it's kind of detrimental to them because most teams can shoot. So it's not like, my team can just shoot that much better, so we can just win games because we can just shoot that much better. Well, in the NBA, everyone can shoot. So, if you have an off night and the other team is just playing decent, they're going to beat you. But so basically the Rockets have to be just on to kind of come away with the win. And I don't know. I before this game starts, I would almost even say that OKC wins. And I watched the Westbrook game in game 6, and he just didn't. It reminds me of old OKC where it was just him, and he just had to try so hard to do everything to try to win. And that's just not the player he is. He's not LeBron James. He can't just carry a team on his back. He's a point guard. You could say he's a shooting guard because he makes threes, but that's not the player he is. He's not just a complete athletic freak. So for him to try to do everything, and especially when, he didn't do everything to get him here. So, why is he doing that now? And it might be because of the injury and he's just trying to make up for it. But it'll be an interesting game. Honestly, I think it's like a heads and tails flip. I think either team could come out and win. So we'll have to see in Game 7. And when you guys listen to this podcast, you will obviously know who won the game. But they are the last team that is still in the first round. And let's go on to the second round, where in the East, Milwaukee versus Miami, and Miami actually took the lead 1-0. What do you think about that, Mark?
I was surprised. I mean, I know how good and how well-rounded a team Miami is, and I wasn't surprised they won against the Pacers in the first round, but I am surprised that they took Game 1 in this matchup with Milwaukee. Milwaukee's just been the best team all year, basically offensive and defensively. They've been one of the better teams in the league. And it did take a 40-point game from Jimmy Butler in Game 1 to win, and also Giannis kind of having not his best game. He was the third leading scorer for the Bucks, if that tells you anything. So that there was kind of an imbalance there. If you want to spin it positively for Milwaukee, you could say that, yeah, Giannis was our third leading scorer, but our two other guys, as Brook Lopez and somebody else, had more points than them. They were both scoring in the 20s. So you got some contributions from other people on your team, which if they can keep that level up, that'll make Milwaukee even more dangerous. But Giannis does need to step up, and this is kind of the time that legendary players make their move and they start really amping things up. So for somebody who's might be the MVP this year, already won an MVP, this could be a big kind of prove-it series for him. And I think Trevor did point this out, but their Game 2 is going on right now. As we record right now, it's at half, and Miami's up in this game as well, 66-60. So Miami just has a well-rounded team, and seems like that's kind of been their strength and what they're leaning on. So I will be surprised if Milwaukee loses this series, but Miami is just clicking right now. So we'll see how it goes going forward.
Yeah. So the other guy that had the points was I think it's Kenyon Middleton. I know his last name's Middleton. I don't know his first name, but he dropped 28 points. And to have a player that you don't normally count on, it's great to have him come in and score. But yeah, like as you said, if Giannis wants to be the MVP again, he has to prove it in the playoffs. He has to prove it when games are on the line. That's when you find out the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the like LeBron James. That's when you find those players, and that's when those players take the next step. If you have a player that can basically, what they say, ice water in the veins, if you have a player that can do that when it counts, those are the players that people remember most. Those are the players that usually get the MVPs and all these honors and stuff because they are so clutch in big moments. And I just haven't seen Giannis do that yet. I didn't watch much of the playoffs last year to know if he was kind of that in the playoffs last year. But like the last series, I feel like they just won just because they were the better team, not because Giannis carried them or because anything like that. I feel like they were just the better team, so they won. So we'll have to see what comes of the game. As you said, Miami's up by 4 or 6 points. Closer to halftime. So still another whole second half to play, and we'll have to see kind of what happens in that game and who actually comes out. If Miami comes up with a 2-0 lead, do you think Miami will knock off Milwaukee if they go up 2-0?
There's a solid chance. I mean, if the pattern kind of holds and Giannis isn't doing spectacularly, I haven't checked his stats from this game, but say he has another kind of halfway off game, and Game 1, he did have 18 points and 10 rebounds, so that's good for most people, but kind of off where his production is. But if he can't get up to MVP standards, and Chris Middleton was who you're talking about, and he's a good player, but if he's leading your team and Giannis is slacking, then it could be tough. I think Milwaukee has the talent to win the series, but if Miami goes up 2-0, they have a deep team, and even if Milwaukee throws everything at them, they could count on somebody that maybe isn't a star. You can count on Duncan Robinson or Tyler Hero. If Milwaukee, say, doubles Jimmy Butler or doubles Bam Adebayo, Miami's deep enough that they could definitely pass off to somebody else and have somebody else have a hot night. So if they go up 2-0, it could be a steep hill for Milwaukee to climb. I just think Milwaukee's more talented at the top, but it'd be probably a closer series than I would have predicted going in.
A series that I thought would be closer and so far is not is the Toronto-Boston series. Boston up 2-0 right now in the series, and I don't know. I thought Toronto for sure coming into this was going to win this. I know Boston played very well in their matchup in the first round, but I thought Toronto just had it going, but apparently it's Boston's year to have it. And coming into it, we talked about Toronto possibly being the team that, went for another championship, and now here they are down 2-0 against Boston. What have you seen in these two games that Boston has won? Like, do you think Toronto can get back into it, or do you think Boston's just that much better than Toronto right now?
I do think Toronto can get back into it. If they go down 3-0, obviously that's a steep hill to climb. I think Boston's strength right now and why they've beaten Toronto in these first two games is just that their full team is starting to step up. They're not just relying on Jason Tatum or just on Kemba Walker. Everybody's starting to step up. In game one, all of their starters had at least 13 points, which is good. I mean, usually if you look at a box score, one starter may have like 7 points or may have a couple guys under 10 and just the stars really step up. But their whole team is starting to really get into it. So I think that's where they're hurting Toronto. And Toronto's also not playing up to where they have earlier in the season. Their coach acknowledged as such after their first game. He just said something like, "We're not playing like ourselves," something like that. And in game two, it was a lot closer. So Toronto may be kind of starting to turn the corner, but just couldn't get the win in game two. They lost by 3 points. And I think Pascal Siakam for the Raptors and Kyle Lowry kind of both had off games these first two games. So Toronto may be starting to kind of turn the corner. And if they can take game three and take the momentum there, they could maybe turn it into a series. But if Boston is just throwing all these guys at them and their whole team's on fire, then kind of like the other series, it could be a tough hill to climb when you got 5 to 7 guys who are all clicking at the same time. So game three will probably be a big determining factor in how this series ultimately plays out. And if Toronto can turn that corner and get it going, then I think they could take back the series late and ultimately win it. But game three is going to be a kind of a make or break, I think.
Yeah, and kind of looking at the game two stats, the Raptors were a lot more even. Siakam had 17, Anunoby had 20, Lowry had 16, Van Fleet had 19, and Ibaka had 17. So much more even, kind of what we're used to with the Raptors. And seeing that game one really wasn't that way, and you could definitely tell in the final score box. And on the other side, Tatum dropped 34, so he had a great day for him. 14 of 14 from free throw. Yikes. The fact that you shoot 14 free throws is amazing, and the fact that you make all of them, pretty amazing as well. But two good teams, and the series hasn't really, I wouldn't say hasn't been close. Like, both games were within reach. They just, at the end, Boston came away with it. So, these next 3 games could go the exact opposite way where, they're close, but Toronto comes away with them. So, again, we'll have to wait and see if Toronto can come back and claw into that 2-0 lead that Boston has on them. Going to the West, they are yet to start the second round. The matchups are the number 2 Clippers, which is the number 2 seed, and number 3 seed Nuggets playing. And then we got the Lakers waiting on the Houston and OKC winner. So looking at just the matchups now, the Clippers and the Nuggets, 2 seed versus a 3 seed. Who do you think is looking to be the winner in this if you had to pick, Mark?
I'd say the Clippers, and yeah, I'm kind of going chalk and picking the team that a lot of people thought might win the championship this year anyway. I just think the Clippers are more well-rested at this point. I think both teams have good, deep benches and deep teams where anybody can go off on a given night. But the Nuggets just played a really hard, really tough series against a Utah team that surprised me, and I think that's going to take a toll. They're going to be kind of, with this compressed schedule especially, they're going to be kind of coming off a short rest after a really tough series and facing a team that has probably the most talent top to bottom in the league, or is one of those top teams as far as talent goes. The Clippers, you did see at the end of their series against the Mavericks where they kind of just put their foot down and exerted their will, I guess you could say. And I think if they can stay focused, the Clippers should take this in probably 5 or 6. I think Denver's just kind of be drained from their first round series. What are you thinking on this?
Well, that's actually a really good point. Never really thought about it, about the fact that the Nuggets just played, they had to play their hearts out just to even get the win to move on to the next round. So they could come in a little drained, and that's actually a good thing for the Clippers. I think the Clippers will win too, and mostly just because I want to see that LA battle kind of in the Western Finals to see who gets to go for the NBA trophy. So that's kind of who I'm going for. But you can say that about the other game as well, the Lakers versus either Houston or OKC. You got Houston and OKC still playing right now, and the Lakers have been done for a couple days now, so they're going to be rested, but that's not always the best thing sometimes. I know, and it's different in the NBA than it is in college basketball, but I know in NCAA sometimes you get a team in the tournament that gets like an extra 2 days off, and they come out just cold shooting because they haven't been in that game flow, whereas the next team that's been upsetting all these people is just in game flow, and another upset is coming. So I just don't see the Lakers losing to anybody in the West all the way through, just because the Lakers, they just turned it up even more at the end. They lost their first game against the Trailblazers, and since that, they beat them by like 30. They beat them by 8 in Game 3. Game 4, they beat them by 20, scoring 135, and then in Game 5, they scored 131. So it seems like they're getting nothing but better. They've actually increased in points every single game. So, yeah, I think out of the West, I think the Lakers are easily the pick, but you never know what'll happen. I didn't see the Nuggets even coming close against Utah, so I didn't think that was going to be a close series. I thought the Nuggets would easily win that, but we'll wait and see what Houston or OKC does. Another thing to look at is if Houston does win, then they're still dealing with the injury, and I don't know how big the injury is to Westbrook, if it's something that he'll just eventually get done with it, or if it's an injury that he's going to have this rest of the season until he can kind of go into the off season. Do you know what the issue is, or how long, or what I guess the issue is, and how long it could take?
I think it was a quad injury, if I remember right. And even if he is feeling better, leg injuries are always kind of finicky, and say they do make another deep run, or they kind of push the series to 7 games, he might be pushing on that quad more than he should, and kind of wearing that down, and it could start flaring up again. So I don't know where he's at right now. I haven't heard a lot of news besides that he came back the last game, but leg injuries are always kind of up in the air as far as what you can expect. So as far as what I see for this series, I think kind of like Denver, whoever wins between Houston and OKC is going to have just been through a dogfight and is probably going to be tired and have to turn around in a couple days and play again with a, like you said, well-rested Lakers team. And I think the Lakers will just probably outman and kind of they'll out-effort whoever they play just because they have the rest. And I think they'll move on to the conference finals like you were talking about and face either the Clippers or Nuggets. Be interesting to see going forward who's going to make it to the conference finals. But yeah, I think the Lakers probably will handle whoever they face here in the semifinal round.
Yeah, and not only because of the rest, but the Lakers are, I would say, the most talented team in the playoffs. I mean, they've got 2 superstars that any night, either of them could just go off, and then they got the complementing players around them that could also do well. So I feel like the Lakers are easily the best team in the playoffs, and the fact that they're going to be rested, and LeBron's going to be hungry, and I honestly I know we're not predicting what the outcome will be, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers sweep either Houston or OKC, just because they got the rest, and just because they're just the better team. And again, like kind of what we talked about earlier about like the clutch factor, like when it comes down to it, some players have it, some players don't. And so, LeBron has it. And so, if a game comes down where, the Lakers are down by 2 or something, chances are LeBron's taking a 3, and chances are he's making it. And that's kind of the difference between, especially in really close games where the NBA usually has close games. There's usually like a 5-point difference maybe at the end, but like with a minute left, it's usually like a 2 or 3 point game. So if you don't have those clutch players to help your team, you're not going to win those games in the end. But I feel like the Lakers just have way too many weapons to contain for all 4 quarters without, losing somewhere. So the Lakers obviously I think are the best team still, in the playoffs to begin with, and the fact that they're going to go against an OKC team that's going to be tired, or a Houston team that's going to be tired and injured. And so that's just my prediction for it. I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers get the sweep.
Yeah, I would say I agree. I think you might have one game that the lower seed takes here or there, but I don't have any problem predicting that the Lakers will probably move on to the next round. So I could see if Houston gets hot, they may take one game, or if OKC just has all their role players step up and play as a complete team, they may take a game. But yeah, I think it'd be over in 5 or 6 probably.
All right, moving on to the last thing, and that's going to be fantasy football talk. We've talked a little bit about it just when we talk about football, and then we have those podcasts that come out every Sunday where we go over the divisions in the NFL. We've gone over all the NFC. We've gone over all but 2 of the AFC, and in this week it's going to be the AFC West, and that will be up Sunday if I remember to put it up. And so I know this week's was a little late. It actually came out like Wednesday or today or something. So I apologize about that. I will do a better job. But getting back to fantasy football, we're about 8 or 9 days away from the first game kickoff on a Thursday night between the Chiefs and the Texans. And fantasy football has been kind of just weird because just about maybe a month or so ago, we were talking, well, is the NFL even going to play this year? Are we going to have this? They cut off preseason, okay, and now they have so many people in the stands with certain teams, and so we're kind of just rolling by the seat of our pants, and that's kind of what I feel like I've done with fantasy football this year. Usually I have about 12 teams a season. I play a lot of like Yahoo, and I play the league where you pay like $20, and if you win you get like 120 or something like that. So I play some pretty leagues where people definitely pay attention. It's not like you're in a group with your friends and 4 of you like football and actually set your lineups, and the other 8 just, I don't know, eat pizza on Sunday and drink beer. So I'm into the fantasy football stuff, and I love fantasy football, and my plan is to make sure you go over to the YouTube channel, because I'm actually going to kind of film the drafts that I do perform in Yahoo in the draft league. So I'm going to record those and kind of talk about them as I go to try to give you some insight into why I'm taking the player I am, or why I set up the team I am. So if you're kind of into the fantasy football, or fantasy in general, fantasy sports, I do a lot of fantasy sports, then make sure you go over to our YouTube channel and check that out. I know we have a league together. I'm not sure if and when we're drafting. We're kind of waiting on the commissioner to tell us that. But from years past, it's a lot of fun. I know the year that I got married, for my bachelor trip, on that Sunday morning, we woke up after a fun night out and drafted our teams. And so we usually try to do it together, but since I'm like 700 miles away from everyone right now, and because of COVID and everything, it sounds like we might do an online league this year. But what do you think about fantasy football? Do you like it? Is it fun? If someone hasn't played fantasy football, what would you tell them to either deter them away or try to get them to join a fantasy football league?
I would encourage people to join. I think it makes you watch the game in a different way. Maybe appreciate running backs who can catch, or different parts of a quarterback's game, or what a defense does, because you'll be getting points from that, and you'll be kind of have this added competition. And it makes you get invested in guys that you probably normally wouldn't. Like if you pick up some guy off of I wouldn't call it a free agent, but not claimed by anybody, and he goes off for 4 weeks in a row. You're cheering for a guy that you didn't know anything about. at the start of the month. So it's really interesting. And I mean, I've got more invested in it probably the past 3 years, 2 or 3 years. We've been in this league together for a while, and at the beginning, I think I wasn't as into it and maybe not paying attention as much as I should have or changing my lineups. But the more you get into it, the more you pay attention and kind of look at the scoring and everything. It becomes more fun, and like I said, turns you on to different parts of the game that you might not normally look at. And there has been some news that would probably impact fantasy just this week. I mean, Leonard Fournette got cut from the Jaguars. He could be a big pickup for some team depending on where he ends up. Alvin Kamara has kind of been contentious with the Saints as far as his new contract, and I know they want to bring him back, but that's something that if it goes really poorly and he asks for a trade, that could kind of swing what his role in fantasy might be or how he performs. So it makes you pay attention to everything that's going on in the football world, not just your team. I think that's what's kind of eye-opening to a lot of people, and I really enjoy it. I would encourage anybody who's on the fence to maybe start one with your friends and family, or just pick a random league of people who maybe also first-timers, and just try it out and make sure you pay attention every week and who has their bye week, who people are playing, what the matchups are, that sort of thing. But I would encourage, and I think it's a lot of fun.
What would you say your favorite thing about playing fantasy football with friends and stuff is?
Just talking trash every once in a while, or trades, and everybody else. Like we have, like you said, we have a kind of friends and family league, and just seeing trades and how everybody reacts to that. Why'd you give him that? He already is first in our league or whatever, and you gave him Alvin Kamara for some backup running back or something like that. It's fun to kind of see the trash talking and complaining and how everybody handles everything. And you see a wide variety of kind of how people are invested even in our league. I mean, some people will kind of just pick their players and let it go and maybe not edit it or not kind of switch lineups out as much. And it's interesting to see how they handle it. Some people just get lucky, and I know one person in our league, I won't say his name, but he always drafts basically the entire Chiefs offense if he can, and he basically gets lucky and wins about every other week and doesn't edit his lineups because he's got the Chiefs offense, and that's good enough to win most weeks. So it's just fun to see how your friends react and who's into it, who's not, how people kind of process trades and what gets shut down and who wins every year. Because, I mean, we have people kind of, I think I've got third a couple of years in a row, but it kind of changes who's at the top depending on your draft and how you handle throughout the season. So it's not always the same people at the top because football is it's a game where somebody gets an injury that could mess up your real life team and your fantasy team real quick.
Yeah, and kind of talk about the friends and family stuff is we don't, we're more grown adults. We have our own families. We live hundreds of miles away from each other, and it's still something that we talk about on Thanksgiving, or we'll call them up or text them and be like, hey, I want your player. What do I need to do to get your player? And then side stuff happens where people want a guy and a case of beer and all this other stuff. So it's just a lot of fun to do, and it keeps kind of the family together. It keeps like the family camaraderie together, I feel like, and especially in our family where we have some people that really, really are competitive, and it's fun to get them all riled up, and you get people that aren't competitive and then they get in on it. It's just a lot of fun, and I would suggest it to anybody, even if you don't really understand what's going on. And I remember a couple of years ago, one of the guys, his girlfriend came in and she just picked the hottest players in the league, and she ended up finishing second. So there's no real draft strategy or anything to these leagues. It's just mostly for fun. And as you said, 1 year me and my brother-in-law finished first and second, and then the next year we were the last two in the league. So it switches every year. It's different every year. Some teams do better, and then you'll draft like the same team the next year and they won't do anything. So I would really suggest it to anybody, and now is like the best time to get into it because most people don't have too much going on right now, any like extracurricular activities because of COVID and everything. So now would be like the time to get into it because you would have more time to invest and kind of like what you said, like I used to just watch the Chiefs, and then once they were done, I would be done with football and go do my own thing. Now I watch Thursday night football, no matter who it is. I watch Sunday morning or the Sunday morning fantasy show to see if injuries happen or who's in, who's out. Then we got the Sunday game at noon that we watch, and then you got a game at 3 that you watch, and then you got Sunday night football, and then you got Monday night football. So yeah, it's a lot. And it's fun to watch those games when you're cheering on someone that's not on your team, kind of like what you said. I mean, yeah, I can cheer on the Chiefs and they win and I'm awesome. Everything's great. And then it's like, okay, well, I need this running back from the Ravens to score me at least 20 points. So every time he gets the ball, you're cheering for him to run for a touchdown. And it's a lot of fun, and I would definitely suggest it to other people. And again, if you kind of want to watch what it's like, feel free to follow our YouTube channel, and I will be kind of going over a couple of drafts that I do. I got, I think, 3 drafts on Friday. I got 6 drafts on Saturday, and I think 2 drafts on Sunday. So basically going to be a lot of drafting, and I'll kind of talk about why I'm picking people the way I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And hopefully that'll help you if you're kind of new to the whole fantasy football thing, kind of what's going on, or trying to understand what fantasy football is and how it can be so much fun.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask questions of other people in your league, or like Trevor said, look up different YouTube videos or different podcasts. I know I'm a big fan of The Ringer and everything they have going on, and they have a whole podcast just dedicated to fantasy football. So don't be afraid to look for information. And if you play on Yahoo, they kind of send out some different videos as far as who's rising, who's falling, that sort of thing. So just kind of pay attention and look for information, and you should do fine. So I would, like I said, I would encourage anybody who's on the fence to join a fantasy league if you haven't already. And I think that'll wrap it up for us this week. Thank you to everybody for listening to another episode. We appreciate you guys and love having all these listeners, and we would love for you guys to subscribe if you haven't yet. If you're watching on YouTube and haven't subscribed on whatever podcast channel you listen to, go ahead and subscribe on there. Vice versa, if you listen to us on Apple or Spotify or one of those things, go check out our YouTube channel. But subscribe in both places. Like I said, we do have a YouTube channel. You can find that by searching Slackers Sports Show. And you can also find us on Twitter. We post important news stories, links to podcasts, things like that. And you can find our Twitter page by searching @Slackers Sports.
And then we got every Sunday, well, we got 2 Sundays left, basically. We got the AFC West coming this Sunday, and I think what we'll do, hopefully, is before the Kansas City game is we will do the last AFC division, and that would be the AFC East. Hopefully we can get all those in before the season actually starts. But so make sure you subscribe so that you can listen to those podcasts as well.